Why are most people right-handed? The strange evolutionary mystery hidden in your brain. Take a moment and look at your hands. One of them feels normal. The other feels wrong. Try writing your name with your non-dominant hand. Suddenly, something you've done thousands of times becomes awkward, slow, and almost impossible. But have you ever wondered why? Why is one hand in charge? Why are roughly 90% of humans right-handed, while only about 10% are left-handed? And why has that exact ratio remained almost unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years? Scientists still don't have a complete answer. But what they've discovered is far stranger than most people realize. Because your dominant hand wasn't chosen when you picked up your first pencil. It wasn't decided when you learned to write. And it wasn't even decided when you were born. Your brain had already made that decision before you ever took your first breath. In fact, the story of your dominant hand may begin hundreds of thousands of years before civilization itself existed. And it reveals something fascinating about how human beings evolved. Let's start with a simple question. Why are most people right-handed? At first glance, it seems obvious. Maybe it's cultural. Maybe people simply copy each other. Maybe parents teach children which hand to use. But that explanation falls apart almost immediately. Because no matter where scientists look, the numbers stay remarkably consistent. Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, South America. Ancient populations, modern populations. The ratio barely changes. About 90% right-handed, about 10% left-handed. Again and again. Across time, across continents, across cultures. And this isn't just a modern trend. The pattern goes back astonishingly far. Archaeologists have examined ancient skeletons dating back hundreds of thousands of years. The dominant arm of a person becomes slightly stronger, denser, and more developed after a lifetime of use. By studying those subtle differences in ancient bones, researchers can often determine which hand someone favored during life. The result? The same pattern. Roughly 1 out of every 10 individuals appears to have been left-handed, exactly like today. That means this isn't a cultural habit. It's something much deeper, something built into us. And evidence suggests it may be older than civilization itself. Older than farming, older than written language, possibly older than modern humans. One of the most fascinating clues comes from an ancient cave in Croatia. There, scientists studied the teeth of a Neanderthal who lived around 130,000 years ago. At first glance, the teeth looked ordinary. But under close examination, researchers noticed tiny scratches crossing the front surfaces. Those scratches told an incredible story. The Neanderthal had likely been preparing animal hides for clothing. To do this, they held the hide in their teeth while pulling it tight with one hand. Then they scraped it clean using a sharp stone tool held in the other hand. Sometimes the tool slipped, and when it did, it scratched their teeth. The direction of those scratches revealed which hand held the tool. The answer? The right hand. Again, and again, and again. Researchers found the same pattern across multiple ancient human relatives. Even members of Homo habilis, nearly 2 million years ago, appeared to have favored the right hand. Think about what that means. Long before cities, long before kings, long before pyramids, our ancestors were already showing a preference for one side of the body. The habit is so ancient that it may have accompanied humanity through nearly our entire evolutionary journey. And the evidence doesn't stop there. Look at prehistoric cave art. Across Europe, Indonesia, and South America, ancient artists left handprints on cave walls. To create these images, they placed one hand against the rock and blew pigment around it. The result was a stencil, a frozen snapshot from thousands of years ago. What's remarkable is that most of those handprints are left hands, which means the artists used their right hand to hold and spray the pigment. Once again, the majority favored the right side. The pattern appears everywhere we look. So why does it happen? The answer lies inside your brain. Your brain is divided into 2 hemispheres. The left hemisphere controls the right side of your body. The right hemisphere controls the left side. But the 2 halves aren't identical. They specialize. And one of the most important specializations involves language. For most right-handed people, language processing occurs primarily in the left hemisphere. Speech, grammar, communication, much of it happens there. But here's where things get interesting. That same hemisphere is heavily involved in tool use and fine motor control. In other words, the part of the brain specialized for language is also heavily involved in manipulating objects. It's almost as if evolution linked communication and tool-making together. The ability to speak, the ability to use tools, and the preference for a dominant hand, all clustered in the same region. Some researchers believe a genetic tendency known as the right shift theory helps explain this. According to the theory, many humans inherit a subtle biological push that encourages language and hand dominance to develop in the left hemisphere. Since the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, most people become right-handed. But here's the important detail. Scientists don't think there's a specific gene that creates left-handed people. Instead, there appears to be a genetic bias toward right-handedness. When that bias isn't present, the brain simply chooses a side more randomly. In other words, left-handedness may not be caused by a special gene. It may be what happens when the usual instruction doesn't arrive. But that raises another mystery. Why did humans evolve a dominant side at all? Why not use both hands equally? Surprisingly, the answer may have something to do with walking upright. Humans aren't the only species with strong handedness. There's another animal that shows a similar pattern. Kangaroos. And kangaroos happen to share something unusual with us. They regularly move upright on two legs. Researchers discovered that most kangaroos prefer using their left forelimb for certain tasks. Not right-handed, left-handed, but still strongly biased toward one side. This suggests something fascinating. When a species evolves upright movement and frees its hands from locomotion, the brain may benefit from specializing. Instead of having both sides do everything equally, one side takes charge. The exact side may differ between species, but specialization itself seems advantageous. Which brings us to the biggest question of all. If right-handedness offers advantages, why haven't left-handed people disappeared? After all, natural selection usually removes less useful traits, yet left-handers remain surprisingly common. The answer comes from competition. Imagine you're a boxer, or a tennis player, or a baseball hitter. Almost everyone you face is right-handed. Your brain becomes trained to expect right-handed movements, right-handed punches, right-handed swings, right-handed reactions. Then suddenly, a left-handed opponent appears. Everything is reversed. Angles change. Timing changes. Reflexes become less reliable. For a split second, you're confused. And sometimes that's enough. Studies consistently show that left-handers are overrepresented in many competitive sports. Baseball, boxing, fencing, tennis, mixed martial arts. The advantage isn't strength, it's unpredictability, because left-handers are rare, and rarity itself becomes a weapon. Evolutionary biologists call this frequency-dependent selection. When something is uncommon, it gains an advantage. As it becomes more common, the advantage disappears. This creates a natural balance. Too many left-handers and the surprise factor vanishes. Too few left-handers and their advantage grows stronger. The result? A stable equilibrium, around 10%. Exactly where humanity has remained for thousands of generations. But life isn't only about competition. It's also about cooperation. And here, left-handedness can become a disadvantage. Think about the world around you. Scissors, school desks, musical instruments, tools, machines. Most are designed for right-handed users because right-handers are the majority. The larger the majority becomes, the more society naturally builds around it. This means left-handers constantly adapt to a world designed for someone else. In sports like golf, where competitors aren't directly facing opponents, left-handers often lose their unusual advantage. The surprise factor disappears. Only the challenges remain. Competition pushes left-handed numbers upward. Cooperation pushes them downward. The balance between those forces appears to have settled around 10%, generation after generation, for hundreds of thousands of years. Yet perhaps the most fascinating difference between left-handers and right-handers isn't visible at all. It's hidden inside the brain. In many right-handed people, specific functions are tightly assigned to one hemisphere. Language stays mostly on one side, spatial awareness on the other. Each hemisphere has a relatively strict job description. Left-handed brains often operate differently. Research suggests information is distributed more evenly across both hemispheres. The boundaries are less rigid. The communication between sides can be more flexible. This doesn't mean left-handers are smarter. It doesn't give them superpowers. But statistically, their brains are wired somewhat differently. Interestingly, when speech-related brain injuries occur, left-handers sometimes recover language abilities more effectively because functions may be distributed across both hemispheres. Their neural organization is often less specialized and more interconnected. It's a subtle difference, but it's real. And it reveals how many different ways the human brain can solve the same problem. Yet despite these fascinating biological realities, history hasn't always treated left-handed people kindly. For centuries, many cultures viewed left-handedness with suspicion. Even language reflects this bias. The Latin word for left eventually gave rise to the word sinister. In French, the word for left became associated with awkwardness. Even in English, right means both a direction and something correct. Meanwhile, left-handed children were often forced to change. Teachers tied hands behind backs. Parents punished children for writing with the wrong hand. Schools treated left-handedness as a defect. Many people spent years trying to force their brains to obey rules they were never designed to follow. And most failed. Because the brain had already made its decision. Long before the first pencil. Long before the first classroom. Long before the first day of school. The choice had already been made. Before birth. Perhaps before you were even fully formed. Which brings us back to your own hands. One of them feels natural. The other feels strangely unfamiliar. Not because you trained it that way. Not because society told you to. But because millions of years of evolution shaped your brain to favor one side. The hand you wave with. The hand you write with. The hand you instinctively reach for. That preference is older than civilization. Older than recorded history. Older than language itself. And if you're one of the 10% who reach with the other hand, you're not an exception to the rule. You're part of the reason the rule exists. A living reminder that evolution doesn't always choose one winner. Sometimes it preserves a balance. And for 500,000 years, that balance has remained almost perfectly unchanged. Because somewhere in humanity's distant past, being different turned out to be useful. Useful enough to survive. Useful enough to endure. Useful enough to remain with us to this very day.